So welcome back. We're here to do a final session in which we address a bunch of the questions that have been raised in the course of the Teach Out. And before we do that, we thought we might give a few of our own general impressions about what has happened during the course of the last 2 weeks. So let me start. I'm just going to give a couple of the vague and broad impressions that I had interacting with people in the forums and watching what's happening. So this topic is one that I think was really good to use for a Teach Out, because everyone who's involved in a Teach Out on the Coursera platform is online. And once they're online, they're engaging in exactly the kinds of activities that are revealing things about them to people they know and don't know, and they're being subject to the kinds of personalization that we talked about in the Teach Out. So everybody who's involved in the Teach Out is actually a participant in this activity that we're discussing. And that came out really clearly in the things that people raised in the discussion forums. Everyone was talking about their own personal experiences. And I think that made the interchanges really valuable. And they taught me a lot about how a wide variety of people, not just here in the United States, but all across the globe, are interacting with privacy. So it was a really great opportunity for me to get a better sense of what's happening.
So my first impression is fun. It was fun and heartening to see this many people come out and care about a topic that I care passionately about. So I've been working in the privacy field such as it is for going on 20 years. And it's ebbed and flowed in terms of the attention it's gotten. But I think certainly our digital age is pushing the conversation. So what was both heartening and scary to me in some ways is some certain notions were reinforced for me. I mean, privacy is challenging. So it holds multiple meanings, it's highly contextual, it's immensely personal, as you talked about, Tim.
Yeah.
And I'm left with a continuing impression that privacy ultimately is kind of like an elephant. It's more readily recognized than described, and that was reflected in some of the conversations we saw in the forums. The other thing that I really enjoyed seeing is that people want to do more. They want to know more. And so some of what we're going to talk about today and trying to answer questions that frankly we often can't answer is going to be a takeaway that we all play a part in this. We all are going to have some sort of say in digital privacy, reputation, and identity.
Yeah, that's great. So let's turn to some of the questions. Why don't you start with the first?
Sure. So what's going to happen with all the data generated as part of this course, and the opinion is expressed by the participants, or to put it another way, what's our right to privacy in this course that is about privacy?
Right. Well, I think that's a really great question to ask. I hope you're all thinking about that every time you use something that's online. In this case, there are a bunch of different answers to the question. First of all, there's what is Coursera, the corporation, going to do with the data that was created in the course of this Teach Out. And you can go read, and you should, Coursera's privacy statement. It's not as long or impossible to read as some privacy statements are, but it's still pretty long and pretty arcane. And it more or less says that you've given up the right to some of the things that you've created, and that Coursera has the ability to use them for various not fully described purposes. Another way in which you revealed things about yourself in the course of this Teach Out is that you engaged with the community, all the other participants in the Teach Out. So when you're posting to forums, you probably knew that other people who were part of the class were seeing what you posted to the forums, and that they might draw on what you posted or reuse in some way or restate what you posted. So that's another way in which you were part of a community.
Yeah, the last piece about the privacy policy, and speaking as someone who is, for better or for worse, written some, Coursera's is the norm. There are areas where it's very ambiguous, and as hard and painful as it might be, I do encourage you to occasionally read those privacy policies to get they're there for you to be provided some level of understanding. And if you have questions, they usually have a place to ask. Now, whether you get answers back, different matter.
Yeah. So, a next question. How ethical are companies in their data collection and usage? Do they collect, store, and share data as securely as they can? This is a question which clearly has many answers.
So I'll start with the last part about security first. So I think a lot of us are aware of the numerous security breaches that happen across the world on an all too frequent basis. And the answer is going to share, the second question is going to share the same one as the first. Is often we don't know. So how ethical are companies in their data collection and usage? How ethical are individuals as you work with them in the data you provide them. It's kind of the same answer. Your mileage is going to vary. One of the reasons privacy policies are there is an attempt at a description of data collection and usage.
Yep.
Whether you consider that ethical, that is up for you to decide. But we don't know. And so one of the reasons we are having this teach out is to make you think about these questions, asking these questions. And it's great to ask them of us, but and you asked about in the previous question about how we are using the data here at Coursera, the University of Michigan. But you need to ask it of a whole lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. I think this is an example where thinking back to the pre-digital form of identity and reputation is relevant. People have always known things about you or me, and they use that information that they have in good or bad ways, right?
Yeah.
So that fact that someone might look at you, Saul, and decide you're a certain kind of person because you look a certain way might be quite unethical for them to do that, right? But they have been doing it.
Yep.
And the same thing is true with companies. I think, I expect good behavior from most companies. I think I receive good behavior from most companies. Also from most other organizations, educational institutions, governments, nonprofit organizations. They all are engaged in the same kinds of activities. So I generally expect good behavior from them. We generally get, I think, good behavior from them. But that's no guarantee, and nor is it, does it mean that we should never provide any oversight of those organizations or think carefully about what it is they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of my friends are afraid, one question starts, of sharing any information on the web, but they also feel they don't have anything to hide, and they're not afraid. Should they be afraid of sharing things? Or because they don't feel any fear of sharing, should they have nothing to hide? Tying into that a little bit is a second question, are there any psychological effects associated with data collection?
Yeah. So I think we discussed a fair bit in the teach out the reality that most of us, when we're being observed, behave differently and even just feel differently from when we're not being observed. It's one of the reasons why privacy is so valued, so valuable, so important for the formation of personal identity, the ability to explore, to be a certain way without having the constraint of observation on you. So I think there are reasons, not necessarily to be afraid, but to be private. Not because you have something to hide, but because privacy allows you something that observation doesn't fully allow. So that sense that everyone needs times to close the door, to be private, to be able to whisper in the ear of only one other person and not the whole world, to be able to share things in private kinds of ways. So I think everybody needs that. So it's not that you should avoid surveillance universally, because if anybody ever saw you do anything, it would be bad. But the idea that there is a spectrum of privacy in our lives and that we need to maintain that spectrum of privacy, I think is really clear. I think there would be real psychological damage if we didn't allow that.
Yeah, we talked a lot throughout the teach out about the importance of privacy in relationships, human growth and development, and even more broadly around political expression and artistic expression and intellectual curiosity. And that ability to segment off yourself to think and grow and develop, even if you have nothing to hide, is an important factor and something that privacy is inherently there for. So you don't end up conforming, which is often what we do under observation.
Right. The ability to have multiple selves reflecting different reputations in different spaces, to have a private family self, to have a public professional self, perhaps. All of those things are something that you need to have some control over who sees what. So I think there will always be a need to have some control, but I don't think there should be an automatic fear of having anyone observe anything. Right. I think that would be.
Well, to your point, we've always been under observation.
Yeah, we all. If we live in any way in society, we are. So, a next question. I decided to take this teach out because we're constantly bombarded with ads on Google of products we viewed weeks prior. Facebook ads are tailored to our interests, and it seems everyone knows everything. Can we protect ourselves from this? If so, how do we protect ourselves? And a second question that's really related asked, how are marketers using this powerful tool, this collected data, to affect our preferences and opinions? So this is a great question, and it's one that it's impossible to kind of miss
Right.
when you exist in the online world today. I think even over the last year, the degree of personalization, and perhaps especially the speed of personalization, has gotten really obvious. So you might be on one website in a completely different place, search for or look for something, and then come back to Facebook, and within a minute, you're getting ads about that thing that you looked at. So the speed at which this data is moving around is something else that's really changed.
Yeah, how do we protect ourselves is a fairly loaded question. It's assuming we need to protect ourselves, which gets back a little to the last question about something to hide, nothing to hide. Uh, I guess how it's tough. So data is being hugely collected, aggregated, and algorithmically making choices or decisions pushed our way, whether that's about something to buy, something to read, something to look at. Some of it gets to be about a personal choice of how often you want to take part in that ecosystem. There are certainly tools out there and that you have the ability to use inherent to some websites, other ones you might have to add on, that can strip away some of that data collection that leads to you being served personalized things. But it's a trade-off. So I happen to like Amazon. They've acted ethically towards me. They seem to serve me the things I might want to see, whether that's a new book, a film, maybe it's a new chair for the house.
Yep.
But how do we, again, getting back to how do we prevent this or how do we change this, it really is going to be about us as individuals making some choices, either working with companies we involve ourselves in transactions or with government lawmakers to say, this makes me uncomfortable.
I think that another important form of agency that everyone has is their choice to participate in these communities. So we could take an example that's very widespread, like Facebook, and say it's clear that Facebook has built their entire business model around collecting this data and being able to use it. So if you want to use Facebook, you pretty much have to participate in that. You have to accept that they're going to use most of the information they have about you and the information they have about people you're connected to form views about you and to feed things to you. If you really get uncomfortable with that, and I have to say at this point, I'm pretty uncomfortable with the way Facebook is working right now. You might need to choose to leave that community. And if the pull, I think for me, the pull is that a bunch of people that I care about participate on Facebook, and my actual connection with those people is very important to me. So if I want to leave that platform and not leave those people, I have to collectively discuss it with them, that there's something about this platform that isn't helping us. And then we all would have to leave. Right?
Well,
we have to take some collective action about this.
And, again, privacy ties to relationships. And there's one right there. So, next question, a little bit related to the previous one, is how do we protect ourselves from intentional manipulation based on information shared through social media?
So I think there's lots of different kinds of manipulation that are going on. And some of them, like what you described for Amazon, we might be very happy with, right? We do want to have, for instance, information about our friends show up before other things, right? So certain forms of the personalization, although they might be in a way manipulative, there are ways we might want to be manipulated. They're almost like just plain helpful, right? But there are clearly many other forms of manipulation going on in the social media world now, which are less acceptable to us as individuals, to me as an individual. Some of the marketing things are a little like that. For instance, if a company decides that I am a wealthy consumer and only offers me products at higher prices, I might find that not so attractive, right? Although it's very good for them.
Yeah.
So that's one kind of manipulation I might not like. There's many other forms, though, like manipulation of the information I'm getting, trying to change my views. Perhaps in this world of attention selling, feeding me with false information that will excite me, that will make me angry, make me go back to the platform more. That's the kind of thing I think can be really problematic and complicated. And I think the best way for us all to fight that is just to be sensitive to it. If we start to see this kind of flood of stuff coming at us that is sucking us into it, pulling us into it, that's got to be viewed as a bad thing. And we've got to become more sophisticated in the way we respond to it.
So thinking critically about those sort of information bubbles that we might find ourselves in is, again, it's nothing entirely new in the digital age, but it has become a lot harder because in the digital age, a lot of what we see looks just as equally valid as any other thing. So to badly analogize, in the pre-digital age, that we may be intentionally or attempts to intentionally manipulate us might be through news media. But I think we can distinguish between the New York Times and the National Enquirer. The digital age made it a lot harder. Whose Twitter account is the real one? Whose blog or news feed is the one I should be paying attention to?
Yeah, and it is good to go back to the pre-digital age. I always think it is. For someone my age, at least, there's a lot of information and wisdom kind of in the way we behaved before these things hit us, and the analogy can be really powerful. So if someone on the street corner was screaming the headline of the newspaper and it seemed outrageous, well, probably you would have walked past and not bought a copy that night, right? So maybe we need to think about that kind of thing too. So another question people asked, one of the wonderful things about the Coursera platform and about these teach-outs is that they're very international. So we have people from well over 130 different nations participating in this teach-out, which is really cool to see. So there's a question here about, are there any international guidelines about privacy?
So in short, yes. In long form, it's muddled. So the short answer is the United Nations itself has seen the importance of privacy and has built it into the Declaration of Human Rights. Does everybody adhere to that declaration? Questionable. And so over time, what we've seen across the world is different countries taking different approaches to addressing a very contextual topic that's loaded with socio and political ramifications. So in the United States, we have built something that is known as a sectoral approach to privacy, where we've seen individual types of data, health data, financial data, have laws be built around it. In the European Union, in the wake of World War II in particular, they saw the importance of having a national right to privacy, and the EU has a national right of privacy that each nation must adhere to and can make more restrictive. Some nations have no privacy laws. So it really is a mixed bag, but hopefully it's something we've gotten from this teach-out is that it is a almost international norm to have some sort of notion of privacy. How countries have acted on that, your mileage will vary.
Yeah, and I think another thing I've noticed in reading the forums is that it's not only the legal system that varies from one country to another, but social norms about privacy are wildly different in different places. Many of those differences existed prior to the digital age and are kind of affecting the way the digital age gets adopted in different countries. So I think that's another very important thing to bear in mind. Part of the contextuality of privacy is that there are different social norms about privacy in different places and spaces and at different times and for people of different ages. All of those things come in. And so another part of the kind of global variation in privacy is to see that people have different kinds of expectations for what that should be.
So we got a number of questions looking for tips, resources, tools that might help protect privacy for those who are interested in it. So can we offer any out there?
Sure. So we have put together a list of resources that are available on the course site to tell you something about some of the tools that you might use to think about or understand or protect your privacy. But one of the lessons I think we hope to be giving you is that this is a rapidly changing environment. So any tool that we recommend to you today may be quickly superseded by something better or different, more powerful, more interesting. And so a part of what we're advocating is that you should be aware and attentive to the possibilities. If you think that there's a lot of personalization going on, that it looks like every company is seeing everything you do on every site, then you might want to use some of these tools to understand what kind of data is being collected through your browser, for example. And you may be able to dial some of that back so that it's not so easy for everyone to see as much as they're seeing. And you can look at some of the tools we put on the list to get ideas about that.
Yep.
So a last question. What will happen if companies use the consumer data they collect for purposes different from those listed in their privacy statements? And how should we regulate this data collection, storage, usage, and distribution?
That is the million-dollar question. What do we do if somebody does something that violates something that they said? What if you violated your privacy policy? So frankly, that stuff does happen. There have been companies that have used data for different purposes than that which they declared. In some countries, that is actually, there's been enforcement actions. In the United States, typically by our Federal Trade Commission, will weigh in. But these are few and far between, frankly. And often we don't know if a company is using that data for something that is untoward to what they said they were going to do until it's too late. So leading into the next one, how should we regulate data collection, storage, usage, and distribution? Some of that is why we are having this teach out. We're not telling you what to do, but we want you to be thinking about this as a part of our overall ecosystem in government and how we interact with companies and how we interact together. So individually, frankly, a lot of us, unless we want to change individual behaviors, can't do a lot. But what can we do collectively?
Right. Yeah, so another thing I would say is that it's not just that companies do things that violate the policy that they've written. Most of the policies explicitly say they can do almost anything they want, right? They even include often statements about changes in the policy which just say, we can change this policy. Right? So it's less often, I think, that they're violating their own rules than that they're violating expectations that people have or social norms or ethical behavior, frankly. So they're not breaking a rule, they're breaking a principle. They're violating a trust that we might have had in them in doing something that's really wrong. So it's not something that's very easily addressable in a legal way. It's more important that we act collectively to make it clear that some things are fine with us and some things are collectively not fine with us, that we move away from platforms and resources that are not dealing with our data in a way that we're fully comfortable with. And if we don't do that collectively, then there's no hope. Right? Because an individual person leaving or joining something doesn't matter. What matters is the kind of social response that might occur that can really push a company, a platform, an institution, a government to do things differently from what they have done before.
Well, and ultimately, to me, that is the point of this teach out. Awakening people, awakening you all the learners to think about this important and timely subject and thinking about how you can work together, just as you did in the forums, having wonderful back and forth conversations, to carry on that conversation certainly within the forums still. We hope you'll hang out and spend more time there, but think of family, friends, colleagues, and then ultimately government, lawmakers, and those companies that are taking your data.
Yeah, I think anyone who's invested some time in this teach out should capitalize on that investment by finding an opportunity sometime in the next few weeks to have a conversation with some of the people that you really care about privacy, about what's happening in these platforms that perhaps you share with your friends, family. A simple conversation about that might help spread the ideas that we're trying to raise here, give a broader array of people some tools for having the conversation about this. This is a shared kind of democratic problem that we have. None of us will be the world expert on it. None of us has to be. What we have to be is reasonably informed citizens and participants in this kind of digital world that we're engaging in, aware of the potential risks, careful to communicate the concern we might have about that to people whose responsibility it will be to create these rules, to really actually oversee this process. So as citizens, we don't have to do it all alone. We can't. Right. We don't have to do anything alone. We do it together in a collective kind of way. So that's what we're really hoping will come out of this, that you all will feel now a little more empowered to have a discussion about this, a little more informed about what's going on. Not to be panicked. I don't think there's anything about the situation of data and privacy that should induce panic, but attention.
Attention should be paid.
Thoughtful concern would be a really great response.
Yeah, so as you were talking about having that conversation, think about some of the conversations we had. What is privacy?
Yeah.
What is reputation? What is identity? Those are nice kickstarters.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed at what people pull out, and it is really powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's great. So we're coming to the conclusion of this round of the Teach Out, and we wanted to let you know that we expect to relaunch this Teach Out in conjunction with International Data Privacy Day sometime around the end of January of 2018. So just a few months from now. Our intent is to add some new content, to the Teach Out. We're certainly going to be bringing in some new expert voices along the way. We will update some of the resources and things that we've been involved with. So if, when you're having these conversations with friends and family about privacy, you want to make the suggestion that they might want to participate in the next round of the Teach Out, that would be great.
Only other thing I would add to that is if there's a suggestion about something you'd want to see
Sure.
in the relaunch of this Teach Out, all good ideas are well taken.
Yeah, we expect to probably run it several more times over the next few months so that we have an opportunity to respond to the needs of the community and to take advantage of the growing set of people in the world who are having this conversation about privacy, identity, and reputation in the information age. So perhaps we'll just close by thanking all of you, the many thousands of you who took some time to participate in the Teach Out with us. It's very rewarding to us to see all the views that you have. I've certainly gained a much richer sense of what the broader community of conversation about privacy is around the globe, and I'm sure that's true for you too.
Absolutely. Like Tim said, thank you. This has been extremely enriching for me personally and professionally, and fun along the way, which is always a big bonus.
Okay, thanks very much.